Ata Māria kia koutou, kua hono mai ki tēnei Karakia ata, the morning prayer for Tuesday the 18th of August. It's lovely to be able to join with you in this way, and we're going to begin with a himene from Karakia and Marama Hokianga.
Tēnā koutou te whānau, ko tā tātou himene tuatahi, ko whitu te kau o ngā himene. Hymn number 70. He rongo pai te o ranga, he hari mo te ao, nai hura i ka we mai, i tōna matenga, he kororia he ho nori, ki ai u te a, riki, ko te re me te o ranga, Alleluia ki te atua. Nai hura i po no ai, tō tātou o ranga, i mate ia ki ka wari, e utu mo te ao, he kororia he ho nori, ki ai u te ao, riki, ko te re me te o ranga, Alleluia ki te atua. Kia rongo rā te ao katoa, i tōna ata whai, hei ai anei te o ranga, e tohu ana mai, he kororia he ho nori, ki ai u te a, riki, ko te re me te o ranga, Alleluia ki te atua.
A reading from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 26, and beginning at verse 1. Now some men from Ziph came to Saul at Gibeah to tell him, David is hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which overlooks Jeshimon. So Saul took 3,000 of Israel's elite troops and went to hunt him down in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped along the road beside the hill of Hachilah near Jeshimon, where David was hiding. When David learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, he sent out spies to verify the report of Saul's arrival. David slipped over to Saul's camp one night to look around. Saul and Abner son of Ner, the commander of his army, were sleeping inside a ring formed by the slumbering warriors. Who will volunteer to go in there with me? David asked Ahimelech the Hittite, and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother. I'll go with you, Abishai replied. So David and Abishai went right into Saul's camp and found him asleep, with his spear stuck in the ground beside his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying asleep around him. God has surely handed your enemy over to you this time, Abishai whispered to David. Let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't need to strike twice." "No," David said, "don't kill him, for who can remain innocent after attacking the Lord's anointed one? Surely the Lord will strike Saul down someday, or he will die of old age or in battle. The Lord forbid that I should kill the one he has anointed. But take his spear and that jug of water beside his head, and then let's get out of here." So David took the spear and jug of water that were near Saul's head. Then he and Abishai got away without anyone seeing them or even waking up, because the Lord had put Saul's men into a deep sleep. David climbed the hill opposite the camp until he was at a safe distance. Then he shouted down to the soldiers and to Abner, son of Ner, "Wake up, Abner." "Who is it?" Abner demanded. "Well, Abner, you're a great man, aren't you?" David taunted. "Where in all Israel is there anyone as mighty? So, why haven't you guarded your master the king when someone came to kill him? This isn't good at all. I swear by the Lord that you and your men deserve to die because you failed to protect your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around. Where are the king's spear and the jug of water that were beside his head?" Saul recognized David's voice and called out, "Is that you, my son David?" And David replied, "Yes, my lord the king. Why are you chasing me? What have I done? What is my crime? But now let my lord the king listen to his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, then let him accept my offering. But if this is simply a human scheme, then may those involved be cursed by the Lord, for they have driven me from my home, so I can no longer live among the Lord's people. And they have said, 'Go worship pagan gods.' Must I die on foreign soil, far from the presence of the Lord? Why has the king of Israel come out to search for a single flea? Why does he hunt me down like a partridge on the mountains?" Then Saul confessed, "I have sinned. Come back home, my son, and I will no longer try to harm you, for you valued my life today. I have been a fool and very, very wrong." "Here is your spear, O king," David replied. "Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord gives his own reward for doing good and for being loyal, and I refused to kill you, even when the Lord placed you in my power, for you are the Lord's anointed one. Now may the Lord value my life, even as I have valued yours today. May he rescue me from all my troubles." And Saul said to David, "Blessings on you, my son David. You will do many heroic deeds, and you will surely succeed." Then David went away, and Saul returned home. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God. I'm not sure how much of the Old Testament you've encountered, but if you have, and if you were listening yesterday, you might recognize that the story we've just heard from 1 Samuel 26 sounds pretty similar to the story we heard yesterday from 1 Samuel 24. In both occasions, David has the opportunity to kill Saul, who's pursuing him, and on both occasions he chooses not to do so, even though from a human point of view it would perhaps make sense for him to do so. Now, I don't know about you, but in most human situations, the chance to take revenge seems like one that's very tempting. And again, I don't know about your own situation, but for most of us, we've probably encountered somebody like Saul who one moment seems very repentant and the very next minute goes back to doing the same thing that at one stage he thought about not doing anymore, or at least claimed he wouldn't do anymore. And so in this story we see Saul coming back to do the same stuff, and in some ways we see something that looks very similar from David, but there are some significant differences here. Often Old Testament scholars have seen two similar stories, or sometimes groups of three, and have wondered if this is because somebody made a mistake and copied the story or retold it a little bit differently. Robert Alter's book, The Art of Biblical Narrative, has been very helpful in identifying the kinds of things we should look out for in this pattern of Hebrew storytelling. So in this case, the pattern is seen in the things that are different and significant between these two, and to some extent in the story that we haven't read in chapter 25, that fills in the gap between, where David is safeguarded by God from taking revenge on somebody, and God deals with that person very severely. And in this case, it gives David the confidence to trust that God will do the same in this situation when Saul has been placed in his power again. So David Firth points out in his commentary that it is probable that there were 2 times when David did refuse to kill Saul, with the underlying patterns meaning that the 2 accounts are related. But the important point is that David now acts because he knows what Yahweh is doing. Moreover, Saul also shows new insights. Previously, he acknowledged that David was more righteous, so he said something about David, but this time he confesses his own sin. In chapter 24, David claimed that he had not sinned against Saul, but now Saul acknowledges that he had sinned against David. What's more, even though he first acknowledged in chapter 24 that David would be king, now Saul goes further and blesses David. And what it shows here is this progression in the storyline of Saul realizing, somewhat fruitlessly, how far he is from God, and David actually drawing closer to God. I wonder if you notice that word that David used of wanting to be innocent before God. And so David is now growing in his confidence that God will act on his behalf, and therefore that he doesn't have to. And I want to encourage you again, if you had some encouragement from chapter 24, to grow in your confidence by, as David did, experience God's action on your behalf, and grow in your confidence to leave things in his hands and to trust him to resolve situations that sometimes seem beyond your control, but sometimes seem as if they've been put into your hands and given you the opportunity to take revenge. To put it bluntly, sin is going to sin. Evil people will keep doing evil things. And we will sometimes experience suffering because of it. But what these stories encourage us to do is to trust that God will act on our behalf, and that we do not need to try and take power into our own hands in order to bring about what we see as being the right thing to do. We can trust that God will act to bring about righteous situations in the long run. Obviously, David is still on the run at this stage. He's still being pursued. But he has confidence now that God will eventually put things to rights. Now, we may not in fact see that in our own lifetimes, and to some degree, no human being ever does. But what we find here are these little hints of what things are going to be like when not just King David comes to the throne, but when King Jesus takes up his throne over the entire world, when he returns to put everything to rights. And like David, we have to develop patience, but a patient confidence that God is going to act and that he will bring things to the situation that we long for. I runga e te ingoa o te matua, te tama, me te wairua tapu. Āmene. Let's say this together. Kia whakapainga te ariki, te atua o iha raira, kua titiro mai hoki ea, kua hoku i tāna iwi. Kua whakaarahi ake i ia, he haona whakaora mō tātou, i roto i te whare o rāwari, o tāna pononga. Ko tāna hoki ia, e kōrerotia e te māngai o āna poropiti tapu, no te timatanga iho anō o te ao. Hei whakaoro ia tātou, i o tātou hoa whawhai, i te ringaringa anō hoki, o te hunga katoa e kino ana ki a tātou. Hei whakaputu mō te mahi tohu ki o tātou tūpuna. Hei whakamahara ki tāna kawanata tapu. Ki te oati i o ati a ia, ki a Āparahama, ki tō tātou tūpuna. Kia tukoa mai ia, kia tātou he oranga I te ringaringa o tātou hoa whawhai, a kia mahi wehi kore atu ki ia. I runga I te tapu, I te tika, ki tōna aroaro, I ngā rā katoa I ora ai tātou. A ko koe tama, ka kia ko te porapiti a te runga rawa. I haere hoki koe I te aroaro o te araki, hei whakapai I ona ara. Hei whakamātua I tāna iwi ki te whakaoranga, I o rātou hara e muru ana, he mea hoki nā te aroha, nā te mahi tohu a tō tātou atua. Nā reira hoki I puta mai ai te puaotanga o runga ki a tātou. Hei whakamārama I te hunga e noho ana I te pauri, I te atārangi hoki o te mate. Hei whakatika I o tātou waiwai, ki te huarahi o te rangi māri ia. Kia whakakororia tia te matua, te tama, me te wairua tapu. Ko te ritinga ia I te tīmatanga, a tēnei anō I nai e nei, a ka mautono iho, a ake, āmine. Ko ākona nei tātou, e tō tātou ariki, ka inoi tātou. E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tau ingoa, kia tai mai tau rangatiratanga, kia mea te tāu e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Ho mai kia mātou ai nei he taruma mātou mō tēnei rā. Murua o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga e harana ki a mātou. Au hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia, I ngāri whakaorangi a mātou I te kino. Nā au hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kororia, ake, āmine. We say together the grace. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou ariki o ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmine.